Okay, we're going to talk about the box. This is, if you remember from my Ford boy, he has a parts list of the box, the push buttons, the connectors, and of course the Arduino and the shield and the motor controller. Now on these push buttons, I ordered 5 of these, and they come in packs of like 5. So I got like 25 of them. You got to be careful of that. So the box itself is the same as what he made. The only thing is that on his box, he has the components connected from one side to the other with wires in between. And I didn't want that. I want one box or one side of the box to be separate so that when you separate the box, you don't have you got room to work on this. You don't have everything where the box has to be like right there and everything's in the way and all that stuff. So anyway, we're going to talk about this later. We'll talk about this one first. Now, the holes in the box are the same as what he had. The cutout isn't the same, and the location of the holes are the same. The only thing is that on the top, I added the on-off switch right here, which originally was this one, where this switch, the rocker switch, mounts into this little piece and it fits on top of the box. And this is the diagram of the box. This is what I made it to. So this dimension here, this 1" 107, is symmetrical around the center line for this hole here. Now these holes are 5/8. That's the diameter of the switch body, push button body. And then the location of these 4 holes is the location of this hole, that hole, and the same thing on the other side, this one and that one. Now the only thing that I should have done, which I didn't do, was that when I made the cutout for the panel, this panel here, this cutout here, 2" 791 by 949, and if you can see the location of this, everything comes off the top of the box. So anyway, this panel, I made it to fit the outside of this black piece, the LED screen, when I should have made it to fit the inside of the LED screen, So this black piece is inside the box, and as it is now, this black border goes basically through the box, but it can't go through the box because this little blue thing up here, this adjustment for the screen, is stopping it from going through the box. So what you have is you have a little gap right around the edge of the four pieces, the four edges that show through. So what I did was I made this little piece. It's out of Delrin, and what it does is it's got the four mounting holes. One, two, three, four, and it's got the opening for the screen. So what this does is it fits over this piece, the LED screen. So I got a little cutout here for these switches on top. They're in the way. Well, they're not switches, they're solder joints. So I made a cutout for that. And then there's a cutout on this end for this little piece that's over here. So what this does is this fits on top of here, and it takes up so that when you put it in the box, like that, it creates an area over here to where you don't see the screen come through the box. This is actually sitting on the bottom of the box, and then all you do is see the screen. And here's the dimensions again if you want to look at them. Now on his newer version, he went to a bigger box. And you see the box is much bigger. Basically it's the same layout, except that he added a reset button right here. And on the original version, there was no reset button. It was just, I don't know. I don't think I have the original version here. Anyway, so what I ended up doing was on the top of the box, I added that hole on the end, and I added a little switch, a little momentary switch, which is the same thing as these other switches, these 5/8 diameter switches, but this one's a lot smaller because I couldn't use a 5/8 on the top of the box because it's too big. So I made another mount, which is this one, and what that does is that houses that switch on right here on the end, and I still got the hole for the other switch. So I used the original two mounting holes, and I still use the original switch, and I just made it longer, and I added that hole on the top for the reset button. See what I got here? I just made it longer, I know it's really hard to see because it's material I'm using is Delrin. It's a black plastic. So these are the two mounting holes where the screws go through, and they're blind holes so they don't go through the top. And I also made these. He had some sheet metal mounts, but I made these out of Delrin again. I made one for one side, and then the other one, can't see it because I got the switch in it, but the other one for the other side, and they actually go like this with these components on top of them. Now I'll give you some measurements on that. But I have this mounted on here because I wanted to show you something. See, when this is in the box, this is mounted like this, with the piece of paper on the bottom being the bottom of the box. So if I take the box and I put this like this, see, this hole is where the switch goes through. The one hole here is where this switch goes through. Then this other one goes through like that. So, and the other three switches go across. There's nothing holding them. These are brackets to hold the motor controller. Now, I wanted to show you something, is that when I use this mount, I had to make some cutouts for where the switches go, because what happens is that when the switch is in there, now this switch is like, you got to remember that the top of the box sits on this surface here. This surface here. So when it's in the box, it's really upside down like this. So where the button is actually outside the box. What I wanted to show you is that the distance between the lugs where the wire goes and the heat sink, there's like nothing there. Not much room at all. So what I ended up doing was I used a 5/8 cutter, and I basically countersunk the location of these holes. There's one there, one there. There's like a half a hole there, and a half a hole. You actually got a quarter of the hole here, and a quarter of the hole here. You probably didn't have to do these, but since I had it set up, I went ahead and did them anyway. And of course this one. So that's the pattern. That's the same pattern as these holes here. This one being 1, 2, and these are those outside ones where it only really catches just a little piece of it. You really didn't have to do those, but like I said, I had it set up. I went ahead and did it anyway. So this black piece, which was the cover for that LED screen, it fits in like right there. So when you're looking through the box, you see how that is like covering up a lot of that opening that I made it a little bit too big. Well, a lot too big. Anyway, if you make this opening smaller to fit the inside of that LED screen, you won't have to make one of those adapters. Now what I also got here is on this piece here, the shield, which is actually upside down. When it fits in the box, it fits like that. So I got the screws coming through this hole, that hole, that hole, and that hole on the other side. The 4 holes. The 4 ones, they look like they have brass on them. But anyway, if you look at that, you see that there's a gap in there where those 4 holes are. On both sides there's a gap. There's no solid material in there. There's a space. So what I did was I made up these little bars. And what I did was I put 440 thread through there, because when I put this in here, I didn't want to have to put bolts and a nut. So I put 440 thread in here, and this one's got a cutout. Now these are, I think they're like 90 thousandths thick, but this one with the cutout is because this white thing that sticks out, it's got some solder joints or something right underneath it. So if you put something solid in there, it's going to hit those solder joints. You can't see it because it's really fine. And that cutout only has to be, I don't know, 10 or 20 thousandths. It doesn't have to be much. But I made it a little deeper. But anyway, these little spacers, they fit inside here. They go right in the edge of that, right inside. They line up with those 2 holes, and then the one with the cutout goes in this side, and it lines up with those 2 holes, so that when you put this in the box, you can put screws through there, and you don't have to put nuts on them. You just put some, I use some little button head screws, 440, and they go into those plastic pieces, and it's okay if they go through, because there's those holes, the holes that are here just come up, so you can put a screw longer than what needs to be in there. It just goes out into the air, so it doesn't matter. Just as long as it passes through the little bar. This is what I'm calling the spacer bar. The little black thing. Which is right there. You see it takes up the space. See, this one's got the space because I didn't put the bar in it. See the gap in there? Right here on the very end. On this side, there's no gap because that takes up the space. So when you snug those screws down, it snugs this unit into the box, You don't have to clamp on it real tight, you're just holding it in place, so it doesn't have to be real tight, but just enough to snug it down. So one of the other things I got is on this box. I got this big cutout on the end. Now what that cutout is for this piece, which is where my cables go through. And what I'm using, we'll talk about these little black spacers later. That's something else. But what this is for is, I needed the cables to come out of the box somewhere. So I made this up. There's nothing critical about this. So what I'm using here is I'm using this thing, which is, I don't know what the technical name is, but it's some kind of a connector thing. This is the piece that I just took off. It goes on there. And this is the piece, the bulkhead fitting. So the cable goes through there. And this side, it's got little serrations in it. And this piece here, it's got little serrations in it. And it's got a hole that goes through it for the cable. And you put the cable through it, and you put this in there, and you take the nut, and it squeezes down on this piece that's white, checkerboard kind of thing, and it squeezes down on the cable and keeps it from moving. So the original nut that's on the back of this guy was this. Just a standard nut, plastic nut. And when I made this piece, this nut does not fit because the hex on it. The hex won't allow the nut to fit. And if it, I mean, it looks like it fits, but you can't tighten it because the hex is hitting the end of the side of the piece. Now what I could have done was I could have put the holes closer together, but as it is, I ended up making these little guys. It's the same thread. Happens to be a 20 thread. Now some kind of metric thing, I don't know what's going on. It's not a standard size, standard SAE size. And I don't even know if it's a metric size, but it's a 20 thread. So what I did was I took the diameter of this, the outside diameter of this. Actually, I took the inside diameter of the thread, and I made a piece that size, and then I set the machine for 20 threads, and I just kept working it out until this thing fit. And in order to drive this thing, I had to make this little piece here. So what happens is that this piece drives it with those 4 lugs. Just like that. Because I couldn't get on the outside of it, so I had to get on the inside of it But anyway, that's what I did there. Now the other end of this piece, I put a hex in it so that I can tighten these push buttons. Because when I install these push buttons into this plate, I had to have a way of tightening them, and I really didn't want to use a pair of pliers. You know, it's just not right. I mean, it'll work, but I mean, there's only like 4 of them. Actually 3, because the other 2 you can't get to. Anyway, I made a little hex for that. Now, see, what's nice about that hex is it fits these other parts too, which is these connectors, these aircraft connectors. So it fits that too. So I can use this for these guys, and I can use it for the push button switches. Now the 2 pieces you can't get to, which are underneath these things, I made this guy. I'll show you this later after it's assembled. It'll make more sense. But this is just basically an offset wrench is what it really amounts to. It's a piece of 3/8 mounted on a little thin plate with a little hex on it to grab onto the nut. See, with the nut, just grabs onto the nut and you're able to turn it. This is nothing fancy. I took a piece of plate, I made a hex, I put a 1-inch diameter end mill on it, scored it, went down about 5 thousandths, put a score mark on it. Then on this side, I took a 3/8 end mill after I drilled the hole, scored that, and just drew some lines from the tangent of this circle to the tangent of that circle. Put on a bandsaw, just cut it, and then just sanded it. Nothing fancy. I'm only going to use it 2 times. And